In this video, we're going over how to use flicker-free with other effects, and simple steps to troubleshoot error messages that you might see. Flicker-free works by analyzing a range of frames to detect and remove the flicker. When the time radius is set to 8, for example, it's analyzing 8 frames before and 8 frames after each frame of video. When using flicker-free alongside other effects, you usually want flicker-free applied above the other effects. This is so flicker-free can analyze all of those extra frames first without having to process any other effects. Your clips with flicker-free will generally also render faster with flicker-free as the first effect at the top. If you see an error while rendering, it's possible that rearranging the effects can fix it. You can change the order of the effects to potentially avoid the error. However, it's most likely a conflict between flicker-free and another effect, or an issue with how it's using the GPU. The most common effect conflict we see with flicker-free is with stabilization effects like warp stabilizer in Premiere and After Effects, but it can happen with any other effects that require a lot of processing. Stabilization effects also try to analyze multiple frames at a time, and doing that analysis and flicker-free's analysis can cause errors during rendering. If this happens, changing the order of effects might help, but you may need to render them separately. To do this, apply flicker-free and no other effects, adjust the settings, and export to a low loss format like ProRes 442, then import that deflickered clip and apply other effects to that. You can also use this workflow to deflicker clips first so that that step is done, and you can edit and color correct your footage with the flicker already removed. The settings that add the most processing time to flicker-free are high time radius, motion compensation, and detect motion slow. So if you can get a good result with lower time radius, or with motion compensation off, or with detect motion set to fast, the effect will render faster and potentially avoid errors during rendering. Most error messages you would see while using flicker-free can be fixed by disabling the GPU. This will cause flicker-free to render much slower by a lot, but it does get around most issues if you have a project you need to export. Uncheck the Use GPU box to render without using the GPU. In Premiere and After Effects, you'll also want to go to File, Project Settings, and change the renderer to Mercury Playback Engine software only. But normally you'll want to keep Use GPU enabled and only try turning it off for troubleshooting. In After Effects, it's possible to run out of memory while rendering flicker-free. This is more likely to happen if you have an older graphics card, or if you're rendering footage that's 4K resolution or higher, especially if you have motion compensation or detect motion slow enabled. This can happen even if flicker-free is the only effect applied, and it's actually due to a setting called multi-frame rendering. Go to Edit, Preferences, Memory and Performance, and uncheck Enable Multi-Frame Rendering. We've seen some combinations of effects render faster with this enabled, and some faster with this disabled. Normally it's fine to leave it enabled, but if you get failed renders in the render queue with a message that your GPU is out of memory, turn multi-frame rendering off and it should fix the problem. Finally, if you see visual glitches, green frames, or black frames when trying to play back footage with flicker-free applied, first, if you have other effects applied, disable them so that flicker-free is the only effect applied. And if you still see the issue, it's probably due to graphics drivers that need to be updated, or an older version of flicker-free that needs to be updated. To update flicker-free, go to digitalanarchy.com, Demos, Flicker-free, and download the latest version for your host application. To update your graphics drivers on Windows, the easiest way is usually to use the NVIDIA GeForce Experience app for NVIDIA cards, or the AMD software app for AMD cards, which will have a section for updating the drivers. On Mac, the drivers are tied to the Mac OS version, so if you're on an older version of Mac OS, updating the OS will update the drivers. That covers the most common flicker-free issues, especially when trying to combine it with other effects, but if you have an issue you need help with, or footage that you need help removing flicker from, send us an email at cs@digitalanarchy.com, and you can download a demo of flicker-free to try it out on your footage, along with demos of all of our other plugins at digitalanarchy.com.